Welcome. I'm Lori Byron. I work with the American Council of Engineering Companies, the QBS Coalition here in Michigan, helping to increase awareness and share information about qualifications-based selection. Qualifications-based selection, or QBS, is a widely recognized best practice for procuring professional services, usually engineering, architecture, and surveying services. It's a simple and transparent process for matching the most qualified team to a particular project. And since 1972, with the passage of the Brooks Act, federal agencies have prioritized qualifications over price when selecting architects and engineers. And in fact, a 2022 study by professors from Georgia Tech and the University of Colorado looked at thousands of projects and found that projects that use QBS to procure engineering services actually have lower project costs, faster construction speed, and improved construction quality, largely due to better design documents and fewer change orders. And to give us some real world experience about using QBS and how it can impact a project, I'm here with Bob Jones and Trent Devatella from RS&H, a national engineering firm. So I want to start off with you, Trent, asking you to introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, and then talk about your experience using qualifications-based selection and how it impacts your work.
Thanks, Lori. My name is Trent Devatella, as you mentioned, with RS&H. I've been in the industry for over 15 years now, and I'm a project manager here at RS&H and heavily involved in bridge scoping and asset management.
Thanks, Lori. Bob Jones, RS&H. I'm a vice president and national leader of our project control group that handles claims, schedule, cost, constructability for DOTs, the DOD, NASA, Office of Attorney Generals around the country.
Trent, let's start with you. What do you see as some of the key benefits of using QBS? In what ways, based on your experience, does it improve project outcomes?
Yeah, so I'm heavily involved in bridge scoping, which is the earliest phase of a project. You go out, you take a look at the bridge, find the defects, try and find any issues, potential defects in the structure, and then document it. And then you come up with a cost estimate and repair recommendations. And when you think of the early parts of a project are where the most money can be saved. So the designer uses these scoping documents to design a bridge. And the more they know about this bridge, the more accurate the design is going to be. The more accurate the design is going to be, the easier and smoother the project's going to go, and the less change orders leads to lower costs. So when you go back to the scoping, it's a very important part of this, and the more qualified the team scoping this structure is, the better product you're going to get. So if you look at it from a low cost standpoint, you're looking to save money, you're probably not going to get the most qualified firm. The cheaper firm usually is going to have to take some shortcuts out there in order to be the cheaper firm. And history shows it's much cheaper to fix something in design than it is in construction. So if you put the money up front and put the effort in design, make sure when you're going scope this bridge, you take the time, you close the lanes underneath, and you take a good look at the deck bottom. That's one area where we'll see people cut corners the most, is not actually closing lanes down below the bridge, getting in a lift truck or a bucket truck and striking the deck bottom. And by skipping that step, there's potential you get to the design phase and maybe they recommended a deep overlay, and the contractor goes out to do a deep overlay. No one had sounded the deck bottom, and they start performing the hydro demolition, and they start popping holes in this deck. And before you know it, it's like, hey, the deck bottom can't support this. This might have to become a deck replacement. And it's going to be a lot more costly now to do that deck replacement than had you recommended that in the first place by putting the extra time and money in the scoping phase to get the correct solution. Yeah.
One thing I'd kind of reinforce is I kind of view this as stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. If you're going to go cheap on the bridge scoping, that's where your contractors are going to take full advantage. Prior to RS&H, I was a bridge contractor, owner, general manager, and vice president of a 100-year-old bridge contractor. And we spent a lot of time pre-bid going out, taking a looking at existing site conditions and really assessing when that scoping was done. Because more often than not, we would go out and we would sound our own substructure. We would analyze and sound our own deck. We would take a look at the underside, and we would move money around within the unit prices to position ourselves for big increases. If we think that a deck is going to, start blowing out in hydro demolition, I'm going to bid way up my demolition costs. I'm going to bid way up on my superstructure concrete, on everything that I can to position myself to where I'm going to make the most money for that old scope that was used, or maybe a scope that really wasn't done as complete as should have been. So that is a huge priority. Every contractor, every project goes out and spends the money because it's just what you do on unit price contracts. It's how you evaluate, it's how you get yourself best positioned. And that is absolutely vital on every job that we had. We made a point that every estimator had to visit every job they were going to bid. We didn't want guys taking a look at Google Earth. It's like, I want to have you go out there. I want to challenge what the scoping documents and the quantities say to see if we can take advantage of it at bid time.
We're getting some inside intel. That is super helpful and interesting. One objection that we hear sometimes from owners is that QBS can take longer to move through the procurement process. And as Trent touched on earlier, it can cost more for design because typically involves more hours, firms that have more experience. How would you address some of those concerns?
Yeah, I guess can be a false sense of security that you're saving money on these projects when that's definitely not the case, as a lot of the data showed that you brought up earlier in this conference or meeting. So it's a bit of a false sense of security in my eyes. And then from a time standpoint, there is a bit more of a commitment there. And that's where, if you're willing to put that commitment in, you'll reap the benefits later. Very similar to the concept of QBS, where, hey, hire the firm that's going to put in more time, because it's just a much more efficient spot to put your money, is in the design and the scoping phase, than hoping it fixes itself during the construction.
And I think the good thing that we see across the country is QVS is really seems to be more of the rule than the exception. So as there's different DOTs out there across the country that have been utilizing QVS for a very long time and have become very efficient at it. It's amazing. We had one just in Virginia last week that we did the interviews on Monday, and they had they had a consulting firm selected by Wednesday, and we had fees in on Friday. And, so I mean, I think as long as agencies utilize the support structure that they have with the DOTs, they can find that this could be a very efficient and very expedited process. So they've got a good system in place and no reason to reinvent the wheel. These folks have been doing it for a long time and become very efficient at it.
So the first time or two might take a little bit longer, but once you become accustomed to the process, you're able to move through it much more quickly. That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, and I think all the consultants are conditioned for it as well. It's not like they're going to be surprised by this. Trent, I'd say that the overwhelming majority of contracts that we're pursuing are based off QVS. So that's not going to be, a challenge for your consultants to try and get that figured out and, really move quickly through the process.
Wonder if you have advice to offer for owners who are getting started using QBS. What are one or two things they should do at the outset?
I think from a perspective that MDOT and a lot of other federal agencies use this as standard practice, it would be a good starting spot where get in touch. There's a lot of DOT offices around the state. There's probably someone local even they could get in touch with, go stop by their office, set up a call with, and talk with them, see how their experience with the QBS process. They could show them some of the contract languages, but that would be a good spot to start because that's what they do every single contract already.
Mm-hmm. So leverage some of those state agencies. Yeah, Bob?
Well, like I said, I think you've got agencies that have been doing this for a very long time. They're very efficient at it. I would sure that they could, coach up folks in regards to how to score proposals and how to evaluate them. And then if needed, how to go through the interview process. But, like I said, it's the rule, not the exception. So I think that the entire industry is pretty well conditioned for QBS and has been for quite some time. So I think that the folks are going to be looking to get involved in that. I think there is a tremendous support structure out there that can help them guide them through the process.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of support structure, the QBS Michigan Coalition has a website, and that website is qbs-mi.org. And they have a plethora of resources on that website, from brochures that you could share with your team members, your councils, or boards. They have several sample requests for qualifications that were actually used that you could model your RFQ after, a detailed QBS workbook with templates, and QBS also offers a facilitator to help guide owners through the process at no charge. So those resources are available at the qbs-mi.org website.